Hello everyone, and this time we will talk about the pivot point. And the pivot point is actually important part of working with objects in the 3D world. And let's create some object, for example cube. And every time we enabling our tool, we can see that it stays in the center of our object. And the central part of the gizmo is actually the pivot point of our transformation. So what it means that we are scaling our object from this point, or we rotating our object around this point. It's easy as that. And sometimes we will need to move this pivot point, and generally we will need to know how to control this pivot point so we can use it in many cases. And we will create an example. I will create the sphere, and it will represent the sun in our solar system. So as we know, the sun is rotating around itself, and the planets are orbiting around the sun. So I will create a second sphere, and it will appear in the same position as the previous one, so we can select the sphere 2 in Outliner and move it away. And I will scale it a little bit too. It will represent some planet. And I want my planet to orbit around the sun. So we need basically to move the pivot point. And we have several ways to do so. First way is we can click Insert button. It will move us to the pivot mode. Right now you can see I'm moving my pivot point, and if I will click Insert one more time, I mean hit it on the keyboard, you can see now my planet is orbiting around this point. So I want to move this point exactly in the center of our world coordinates, because our sun stays in the center of our world coordinate. And let's see how we can do so. First of all, we have our grid, and we actually can snap things to our grid. I will go to my mode where I work with a pivot point by clicking Insert, and on the top of my screen you can see we have these magnets, and the left of them is snap to the grid. So right now if I will move out of my pivot point mode, and I will hit on my central element, and I will use my middle mouse button with the central element active, I can click and hold my middle mouse button and move my element, and it will snap to my grid lines. And I can go to my pivot point mode and snap it exactly to the center of a grid. And now my planet is orbiting around the sun. So pay attention that to move and snap your object freely, you need central element to be active. Otherwise, you will snap it on some axis. And we have actually one more way to work with the pivot and the snapping, and I will create a cube. It will be a cubical planet, and I still have my snapping selected, and I will disable it. So one more and more interactive way to work with a pivot is using of a D key. I will highlight it. If I will hold D, it will enable pivot mode, and I will be able to move my pivot. So hold D. While holding D, I work with a pivot. If I release D, I work with the object. We also have interactive way of working with the grid. So that's actually a X key. If I will hold X, it will enable snap mode. So to move my pivot in that way, I will need to hold D, hold X, and the middle mouse button, and the central element active. I will move my pivot point to the center of my universe. If only one axis will be active, the snapping will occur only on this axis, so be sure central element is enabled. So we hold X, we hold D, and we move our pivot. So right now, as you can see, our planet is orbiting right. So our shortcuts is insert to change the mode, or D for the interactive regime, and X for snapping. It's really doesn't matter how you will work. For me, it's more useful to work interactively. For you, it probably will be easier to work with insert, especially for the first time. And one more way of using the pivot, if you will go to the pivot mode, you can see I can just left click on the object and the pivot will snap to the surface.